And all right, well, good morning, everyone. Um, I glad you all could make it here today, and I know we'll have some more people joining us a little later, whether it be for class or for service. I don't know. So we are still in Philippians chapter 2, and Lord willing, we'll finish that today. But we got through the major section of Philippians 2, 6 through 11 last week, and we will start in verse 12. But to sort of recap what we discussed the past last week and maybe some the week before, um, what is the example of Christ that is being displayed in verses 6 through 11? Remember, Paul is saying that you need to imitate, let this mind be in you that was in Jesus Christ. So he's wanting them to imitate Christ. What is it exactly that he's wanting them to imitate? Humility, putting others before themselves. And Christ did that. What example did Christ set for that? What did Paul highlight in verses 6 through 8 especially?
He left heaven, come down to the earth to be a servant.
Right. Yeah, he left earth. Yeah. 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 And as mine says, a slave, right? He be, that's the most humble position, the lowest rung on the status level of status for in the Roman world. If you could be a slave, then you could be a freedman, someone who is a freed slave, and then you're so on and so forth up to like, your father was a senator and you're in line to be a senator. And so you're like super high up in the rung of the Roman world. But Christ this didn't come as a senator or anything like that. He came as a slave and in human and he humbled himself. And one of the things that's highlighted is obedience. He's obedient to the point of death on a cross. And that's a point that Paul is going to say they need to imitate shortly. Um, and uh, so, but Christ didn't just humiliate himself. He was given a name that is above every name. God exalts those who humble themselves. And that's why we also need to be humble. That's an act of trust or faith for us, is we humble ourselves in order to, that God may exalt us and not because otherwise, we have only God. God will humble us. Who remembers the parable of? There's several great wedding banquet parables. Almost there's lots of ones that feature a wedding banquet. But whenever there's a banquet and people come, and oh yeah, actually that's Jesus giving an example. He says, whenever you go to banquets, don't sit in the highest places. And why is that? Why does he give what reason? Yeah, you're in the wrong spot, buddy. You need to go sit back down there, and then you'll suffer dishonor for that reason.
Showing humility is much greater than showing. I forgot what the word is for sitting in the best seat right off the bat. Showing humility is better to show humility first.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. We need to make sure that we are showing that. Yeah, arrogance. So that's what the theme is that God is going to exalt you. That unlike in the Tower of Babel story where people tried to make a name for themselves, we have contrasted in the next chapter of Genesis 12, Abram, whom God says, I will make a name for you. I will make your name great. And that's sort of what we have promised here, is that God is going to exalt us and give us a name that is above every name. And that is, we take on Jesus' name. We are united with him. We get to share in his name. That's a so that's one of the wonderful blessings that we have. But now we're going to see how is it also specifically that Paul wants them to follow this example in the following verses. So can I have someone read verses 12 through 17 for us of Philippians chapter 2?
12 through what?
12 through 18.
Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who works in you both to will and to do for his good pleasure. Do all things without complaining and disputing, that you may become blameless and harmless, children of God without fault in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world, holding fast the word of life, so that I may rejoice in the day of Christ, that I have not run in vain or labored in vain. Yes, and if I am being poured out as a drink offering on the sacrifice and service of your faith, I am glad and rejoice with you all. For the same reason, you also be glad and rejoice with me.
All right, thank you. So, what is, especially in verses 12 and 13, what does Paul command to the church at Philippi here? What? Working out salvation. Yeah, and that's a tough one to understand, especially going with verse 13. Because he says, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. So he could maybe look at what some of those things mean. One, what does it mean to work out your own salvation? Second, what does it mean to do it with fear and trembling? And third, how is 13 connected? For it is God who is at work in you. So how does all these things work together? Maybe we'd start with they kind of inform each other, our answers. But how do you work? Why is it important to work out your salvation? What does that even mean? Because we see several other places in Paul's letters we can't. Salvation has not come about from our own works, the works of the law, the works of righteousness, but rather it comes about through faith in Jesus. So what does it mean to work out or work? Here, mine version says work on your own salvation. Um, so what
To me,
does that mean?
13 gives the answer to that.
Okay. How does it give the answer? Here, tell us.
It says, for it is God who works in you both to will and to do for his good purpose. So that, what it tells me anyway, and I could be way off, it tells me that doing the will of God is what he's asking us to do, and that's working out our salvation. I'm obviously not seeing the whole picture, but that's
Yeah.
what it's telling me, is doing the will of God is working out your own salvation.
Yeah. Yeah, they're working out their own salvation. But it's interesting. God is the one who is, mine says, enabling you both to will and to work for his good pleasure. So if God's the one enabling us to do that, um, yeah, you're right. You're right. And I mean, yes, it is very possible for us to um, say that we have, Christ, do all these things. Even that verse in Matthew chapter 7, uh, they said we cast out demons in your name, we did all these things in your name, and still they did not do the will of his Father who is in heaven. Um, so that's what really allegiance to Jesus is about. But what were you going to say, Brian?
It says, work out your salvation. You have to ask, so who's the work? And I think it goes back to what earlier in the chapter, what we just read about what Jesus did, about the humility. I think our work is to be humble and be open. And we want to do what God wants us to do instead of what we want to do. I think that's our work. I think that's why it comes on the heels of this whole passage about what Jesus did.
Yeah. And it is. Yeah. I think that's getting more towards the point. Is yeah, we can lose our security in a sense that we can accept the grace and we can fall away from it. The author of Hebrews is very explicit about that. So, but yeah, as you said, working on your own salvation is really just working working out. Now that you're saved, now that you are in Christ, you live as though you're in Christ. And because remember, Paul, one of his things is that he wants them to be prepared and ready and blameless on the day that Christ appears again. And that there's a sense in which we're saved now, but that's the real day on which our salvation is fully uh, signed, sealed, delivered. Everything's done on the judgment day, on the day Christ returns finally.
And then I think you have to ask, what is the fear and tremble about? Fear of what? Trembling at what?
Yeah.
And we tend to look at that and say, oh, that's being afraid of God and trembling with that. I think it's being afraid and trembling without ourselves, our own areas, our own sense of, going back to the very beginning with Adam and Eve, sense of that we know better than God. And always be afraid that am I doing that? Am I humbling myself like Christ did?
Yeah. And there's also the sense of fear and trembling and maybe a sense of awe that it is God who is at work within us. It's that's kind of, I mean, that makes me sort of awestruck as well, that my outworking of my salvation is a part of God working within me. It's not uh isn't my the work that I do is I'm only able to do it. The things that I do in regard to my salvation, I'm only able to do that because it says God enables me to work out that salvation. And so that does make you have fear and reverence that without God, my work is completely void and in vain and incapable of coming about. So yeah, right. So there's some other points too. Um, yeah, 2:12 through 18. We'll going on to the next point is that what does it mean to work out our salvation? Part of it is do all things without murmuring and arguing, as it says in verse 14, or more popularly in versions, grumbling and complaining. Why is this so important? What other passages do you come up in mind whenever you think about grumbling and complaining? Or why is it such a bad thing for Christians to do?
I don't know where it's from, but Jesus also said that they will know you belong to me by the love that you show one for each other. And that grumbling and complaining isn't showing that love outwardly. So people see us grumbling and complaining, and the world loves to point fingers and say, that's being a Christian, I don't want no part of it.
Right.
So we're supposed to be an example to the world, which is also says to this corrupt world, we're supposed to be examples to. And grumbling and complaining isn't being an example to the corrupt
Yeah.
world. That's what the world does.
That's right. Yeah. That's true. That's true. And again, to think about it, how is grumbling and complaining in the Bible? What are some examples of grumbling and complaining besides in this verse? Yeah, this is actually is exact phrase that's used in Deuteronomy 32:5, and I think even Psalm 78:8. Maybe some of the words are a little different, but I think I checked it, and the words are either very similar or maybe even switched around. But grumbling and complaining is what the Israelites in the wilderness were accused of doing, and why they ultimately were destroyed. That whole generation, they didn't have faith, because and I think the reason why I think we should talk more about this today and make this one of our focuses for today's class is because I think this is one of the most accepted sins in Christians' lives today, is that we often complain and grumble about things, about other people, and we often don't bat an eye at it. Instead of, it's very accepted among us that you complain about various things, but we see that's a very, very dangerous place for our hearts to be complaining constantly, to be murmuring and arguing about others as well. um, yeah, yeah, let's ask a question. How would arguing and complaining and murmuring be the opposite of humility? Yeah, yeah, you're right. You're making it all about yourself again, because it's
Proclaiming or implying that you deserve something better.
yeah, implying that you deserve something better, right?
And I may be wrong, but I think it's physically impossible to be thankful and grumble and complain at the same time.
Yeah, I think they're opposites, right? So it's kind of hard for one to be present while the other one's present. You're right. So you gotta. You can,
You're right. But I don't like coffee that smells coffee.
yeah. Why is it so easy for us to get pulled into the negative instead of the many, many, many positive things or wonderful things we could be thinking about? Yeah, it it does. It has us wanting things. Yeah, I think that's part of it. The discontent that our society tries to breed in us causes us to complain.
So comfortable now. Back then we were just happy to not get killed by a wild beast
Yeah.
before bed. Now we're like, we have all these comforts, so it's really easy to spot when we don't have one.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. So there is a point to where living a life of simplicity can help you to be less grumble of a person who grumbles and complains, right? That you're like saying that the we can be thankful for all the simple things, food, clothing, shelter that we have, and everything else we can add as sort of a luxury that we're we can say it's a blessing from God. Just be thankful that we have it, and everything else. Uh, you know, if we and hopefully not be as upset when it's gone. That's part of it too. But how does grumbling and complaining also show a lack of faith or trust in God?
Look at the Israelites.
Yeah, the Israelites show it.
They obviously didn't trust Moses and they didn't trust God. They blamed God and Moses for the different things
what are some of the things that happened to Israel that they complained about? There's a lot of things.
Not having food, not having water. They grumbled that Moses took them out of Egypt where they had pots full of meat to eat even though they were slaves.
Yeah. Yeah.
They grumbled because the Egyptian army was coming after them, even though they just saw all of the miracles that God did to the Egyptians.
Yeah. It's like, why would God take us out here to die? They thought that God would take them out there to die. They obviously didn't have much trust at that point, at the very beginning of the trip. And then, yeah, even after they crossed the Red Sea, not very long later, like, you brought us out here to die of hunger and thirst. They didn't trust that God would take care of them. So, okay, let's think not just about Israel, but what about ourselves? Like, why? What is it that we genuinely complain about? Maybe frequently. What is it that we complain about frequently?
This is what I get unjustly accused of every year at the yard sale. I worry about there's not enough people signed up and that it's never going to happen. And then all of a sudden everybody shows up, comes together, and it's super successful. But every unjustly. Oh, whoops, I slipped on the bucket. But every year I get reminded of it.
Yeah.
That's one for me.
Yeah. And
God has to show me every year that I'm in charge. Don't worry about it. It's going to get taken care of.
yeah, that is true. We have to make sure that we trust in God in those situations. What are other places where we need to trust? Maybe trust God more and complain less. When you pray for something but you don't seem to get results. Yeah. Sometimes uh, whenever we pray for something specific, it doesn't get answered in the very specific way that we asked for it. Um, so yeah, yeah, you're right. That's right. And even those, and it's really hard even in those prayers, like for people's health, and it doesn't go the way you want it to. Those are honestly usually the hardest ones. Of why did God not answer this prayer the way that I was hoping He would? And that point, it is a lot of trust because it's like, well, it's probably God probably won't resurrect them right here, right now, in front of my face. I mean, I guess you could pray for that. Could pray for that. God can do things if you ask Him out of faith. But yeah, it's really hard whenever you are confronted with these times when you ask God for something and it doesn't get answered the way you would like, the way that you plan. It's very tough. And that's a time where trust is built or destroyed, oftentimes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you jogged my memory. That's right. Because it was the disciples were trying to cast out a demon, a really bad demon, and they couldn't do it at that point. And Jesus says, as usual in Matthew, "Oh, you of little faith." And he then talks about again that parable of the mustard seed and says, "But this type of demon can only be cast out through prayer and fasting, and the faith that's built and the trust that's built." Through prayer and fasting. And that is a good thing for us to think about, the connection between those actions of prayer, fasting, and faith. Yeah, it's good. It's a good insight. Um, so we as So what is it that we can do this week? Very actionable items of not catching ourselves complaining, keeping ourselves from complaining, and instead being thankful and rejoicing and working out our salvation in fear and trembling. How can we do that? What are some actionable items that we can do?
I think it's keeping your mind on eternal. Because, when you think about being offended or complaining about someone pulled in front of you, those things are so fleeting and temporary and minor, yet we all get out of shape very quickly. And it's, if you're keeping your mind on, gosh, there's more in life than these silly things are happening to me right now. There's an eternity that you're striving for. And I forget that often. It's like, oh, I can't believe they did that to me. Well, it isn't about me. It was really stupid. Because I'm not thinking long term and, well, could be tomorrow, but just the bigger picture. Thinking about the bigger picture.
Yeah. How does Christ's first coming and his second coming impact how I live my life? It should impact, especially those small moments. Like the small moments don't really, they ultimately don't matter. Remember, I'll call us back to this every week. Paul's prayer for them is to help them determine what really matters in Philippians 1:10. And this helps us have that perspective is if we remember what is it that really matters, we won't be grumbling and complaining about various things that are just so short-lived. I think that helps.
One of the things that helps me, obviously not very yard sale, but is to focus and look back on the times in my life when I thought my world was coming to an end, and then realizing over time how God carried me through those periods of time in my life, and He was always there, remembering that worst times in my life when I thought God wasn't there, He really was there. He was carrying me through it. So that in that sense, it has helped me build my faith closer. That in instances that I'm going through, that I'll go through now, I know because of what happened in my past that God's going to get me through it. I just have to have faith and lean on it.
Yeah. That's right.
I think of it in terms of when they laundry. The laundry is never ending at the house, and it's so frustrating. And especially when I find something clean and folded in the laundry pile, I tell the girls to go and clothes, put together the laundry, and I'm pulling out folded shirts. I mean, that is. But then think about it. Like, I have 3 kids. Like, there's an element of gratitude here. Some people would do anything for a bunch of 3 kids laundry to wash. And one day we're not going to have it, and one day there's not going to be laundry baskets for them to be cleaned. And so it's easy to start grumbling and complaining, and I definitely am guilty of that, especially but trying to have a sense of just be grateful for the blessing that
Yeah.
brought, like the coffee bottle brings the blessing of coffee.
Well, it's tough when you have kids' toys or clothes and you step on it that it hurts from that. It's easy to complain.
Yeah. Yeah. It is easy to. Yeah. I understand. It's easy for parents to complain about their kids. That's for sure, or about each other. But we have so much. I think thankfulness is really the antidote to it because you can't really complain and be thankful at the same time, as we've already stated. And so, if we're continuously thankful, as we're supposed to, give thanks always, according to Paul in the end of 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, we're supposed to give thanks always. Right? So we rejoice always as well.
We could, there was a meeting that we would have at work regularly where we put a jar on the table that every time somebody said a bad word, they get called out on it and they have to put $1 in the jar. And at the end of it, when the jar got full, we would have a party. But the point was to make you aware of it. So we could do that here. We could put a jar on the table, and anytime we heard one of those grumbling, we said, hey,
That's true. And then if they complain about you telling them to put $1 in the jar, $2 in the jar. There we go.
But you know, it starts with awareness. And I know
Yeah.
you say,
Yeah.
we need to be more thankful that counteracts, but if you're not aware of it, because I'll tell you, was it last week we had that conversation about driving down the road, fussing about the driver? And I'm telling you, Monday, I got behind, I was in a hurry to get somewhere, and I got behind somebody that was just going like 20 miles on the speed limit. And I'm thinking, they don't have anywhere to go. They should stay off the road, stay home. I'm doing all this, and I'm just now thinking about it. Okay, I didn't think about it right then. Oh, stop! Don't do that. The awareness of it is a big deal because we are conditioned to grumble and complain.
Hmm.
And it may be social media doing it or whatever. I don't know if the Israelites didn't seem to have social media going across the desert. It just seems to be the nature of man. And we're not supposed to follow that nature.
Yeah. Here.
But I think the key is being aware.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, to me, that's the start of trying to get better is be aware.
Yeah.
But if you just grumble and didn't even think twice about it, then that battle that you have, that we all have between the spirit and the flesh, being aware that it's something that
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
Y'all had a party after the driving school, or did that like?
Yeah.
Like, say more about words.
Yeah.
You should have like.
Trust me, the
I want
parties.
star and they cancel each other out.
Yeah.
And the gratitude stars, you can't have both. And then whatever's left over can.
Yeah.
Donate it to a bad cause. Then you're like really motivated not to spend the money. Yeah. Yeah. Get a shock collar for. Yeah. Yeah.
What Jeff and Martha are saying, I was thinking about that here this past week. It seems like, you read your Bible and you read over to all things about complaining, speed up, this is good and be better. But then you have these moments throughout the week or whatever, and then you come back to the word and you're like, man, I need to, and it's this awareness. And I was like, how do you do that? And I think it's about a relationship with God, and it's about praying so the whole being shaping. It's not what we can do, it's what God can do in us, and God can make that awareness stronger. But I think it comes through prayer. It's not just going to be, I'm going to read this word. I mean, you read the Bible and go out and do, but I really think you still have that element of you have to connect with the Father. You have to have that relationship, because I know I'm not always going to memorize, not always memorize the verse. I'm not going to have my Bible right for the week. It's not always going to, pop up in those times, whether it's in the car or wherever it is. But I think that's really God is asked that we work in us in these moments.
But isn't it also something? There's a reason God put us on. If we would give each other, or maybe a certain person that we know, permission to point out we were grumbling and complaining, so that we won't get offended. So that goes back to our conversation we had a few weeks ago. That would be helpful if we were willing to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe we could think about something like that. Maybe how we can admonish and rebuke one another, like kind of Scripture calls us all to do, but do it in a way that's loving and hopefully will help be the most helpful, because it's very hard to call people out of that point without them also just doing their best to not help them harden their hearts even more. Instead of hopefully being usually a gentle rebuke can helpful turn away wrath. I believe that's a proverb. A gentle rebuke turns away wrath.
What do you think he was saying versus being?
Which one?
Versus being as you hold out or hold on.
Okay. Yeah. So
it makes it sound like it's, we're on a journey, you know, it's,
Yeah.
What's the word of life?
Yeah. Yeah, this is the gospel message. It's about Christ. Yeah, so it is about enduring and holding on to this message, life-giving message, until the final day of Christ when He appears. Right. So that again, this is a part of the whole motivation for the letter, is that Paul is going to be Paul is going to want to present them blameless and faultless before Christ when He comes again, and this is what he wants. Is I want you to hold on to this so that I did not run in vain or labor in vain on the day of Christ. That's one of his main motivations for this letter, and wanting them to progress in not complaining, progress in becoming more like Christ, becoming more selfless, more humble. That's what he wants. That's what he desires for them. It's what he also desires for us, and we should desire for one another, for ourselves. We should want to become humble and uh, like Christ in this way, which involves sacrificing everything, your own entitlements, the things you feel entitled to. You're willing to let those things go for something better, for out of faith, out of trust. And then Paul goes on into verse 17. But even if I'm being poured out as a libation or a drink offering over the sacrifice of the service of your faith, I rejoice, and I rejoice together with all of you. Now, what image is he trying to depict here? Maybe not exactly crucifixion, but you're very close. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, being poured out. So he's using language of a libation or drink offering, which was a very common thing back then. We often think of sacrifices as, animal sacrifices before the Lord, but there were different types. There were grain offerings as well. You could offer different types of grain to the Lord, but you could also offer drink, pour out a libation, a drink before the Lord. This was very common in Greek practice as well, to uh, pour out a libation in offering of some god. And so what Paul is saying is that I am also going to be joined with you in your sacrifice as a libation. And what's cool here is this, from 17 on through the end of the chapter, Paul's language about himself, about Timothy and Epaphroditus, echo the language that discusses Christ in verses 6 through 11. Now, this being poured out is like sort of Paul showing, I'm willing to empty myself just as Christ emptied himself in verse 7. Empty myself for you out of the service for your faith, and that your sacrifice will be acceptable to God. He wants them to live in this and be an acceptable sacrifice, that Paul uses the image in 2 Corinthians, I can't remember, chapter 2, I think, about this sweet smelling aroma going up to the Lord. He wants them to be that pleasing, and he's willing to pour himself out for that. And I think you're right. He's willing to die, give everything up to help them. I think you're right about that, Katie.
what's that song that says about being poured out like wine?
Yeah.
How's it, what words?
Have you poured out like wine on the altar for you? So yeah, it's taking from this. That's a libation, right? So I don't remember all the lyrics. I did not sing that song a ton growing up, but I've sang it several times since then. May I be poured out like wine on the altar for you. May I be broken like bread to feed the hungry. Uh, like, yeah, so it's called a life of self-sacrifice, is what that song is calling us to. Yeah, we sing it kind of cheery. May I be poured out like wine on the altar for you. I'm like, do I even know what I'm singing here? Like, that's a big thing I'm saying that I'm gonna do. So yes, he wants them to do this for this common rejoicing, and if we do this thing, we will stand out like the stars in the night sky. We'll shine. That's how we'll shine in the world, according to verse 15. We're going to stand out among this as blameless and innocent in this very crooked and perverse generation, which is again the same phrase used of the Israelites and that of them as people who grumble and complain and they're crooked and perverse. So, yeah. Any thoughts before we move on to this next section?
Is he kind of saying that, I shouldn't say his joy is contingent totally, but his joy is sort of contingent on others, on them?
It is. Somewhat.
Like,
It is.
it said, I mean, like, I should find joy that, we're all doing well.
Yeah. You're right. So whenever I've been doing a rereading, keep reading and studying Philippians, remember a lot of this is determine what really matters and so you're trying to distinguish what does and what doesn't, so that on the day of Christ you may be blameless. We've talked about several things that don't matter to Paul, whether he lives or dies, his own imprisonment, people are speaking out against him, they don't matter. But one thing that does matter is these people being faithful. That does matter to him. That is a very big concern for him, a big reason why he prays. And there are reasons that, if we're anxious about anything, he gets into chapter 4 about what to do in those situations. But I'm sorry if I interrupted your thought, but
It just struck me that, and I don't mean to be selfish of me, but I want to see everyone successful.
Or verse 2 of that same chapter, he says, make my joy complete.
Yeah.
By doing these things. So it's not like he didn't have any choice, but he wanted to do it.
mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. And so, yeah, them obeying and conforming to Christ is how his joy becomes more complete. He sees that they're living like Christ now, and they will be just like Christ whenever their final day comes, whenever he appears again. All right, so now we're going to get into this examples of Epaphroditus and Timothy. Again, I think I've made us say this before, but I want everyone to say it again. Someone say Epaphroditus. Epaphroditus. All right, if you're looking for baby names, I don't know many people that have that one. Epaphroditus. That's a male name. It's a male name. You can feminize it pretty easily. Epaphroditus. Yeah. What's weird is that like the name. His parents were probably more than likely pagan. I mean, it means like a gift of or to Aphrodite. Yeah. I think that's what it means. Don't quote me on that. I have to double check, but that's what I'm really sure that's what it means. And don't get this guy confused with Epaphras in Colossians. He's another messenger of Paul. But anyway, Epaphroditus. So we'll get into. Let's read verses 9. Can someone read verses 19 through 24, talking about Timothy?
I hope in the Lord Jesus will send Timothy to you soon, that I also may be cheered when I receive news about you. I have no one else like him who will show genuine concern for your welfare. For everyone looks out for their own interest, not those of Jesus Christ. But you know that Timothy has proved himself, because as a son with his father, he has served with me in the work of the gospel.
All right.
Or that
And that's yeah. I just need verse 24 through verse 24.
I hope, therefore, to send him as soon as I can see how things go with me. And I am confident in the Lord that I myself will come soon.
Okay. So remember, one of Paul's things is he wants to comfort the Philippians while they're distressed about Paul. And so sending Timothy and Epaphroditus back, well, at least Timothy has not been sent quite yet at this point that we know of. But as this letter is being read, Timothy has not yet come to them. But why is it that he's sending Timothy?
It's
He's what?
It's some news.
Get some news of, yeah, so that Timothy can bring back news about them. Because once Epaphroditus is probably the one delivering this letter to the Philippians, as he'd just been sent back from Paul. We'll talk about that in a minute. Epaphroditus isn't going to come back to Paul, more than likely. But he's going to send Timothy so that hopefully Timothy can minister to them for a while and he can come back with some news and report about the church of Philippi. Now, you might think of this as a little bit sort of an accountability situation. Think about, Paul's giving them commands that he wants them to do. He wants them to get along, be humble. And so he wants Timothy to give some news about them. And hopefully by then, they have got some of these issues lined out. Maybe by the
So
time
do you think that this is
Timothy comes back.
a way Paul is trying to hold them accountable?
I think it could be a subtle way. This is me. It's a little bit speculative, but it is talking about news about them. And of course, he says, "I have no one like myself who will be genuinely concerned for your welfare." And so he wants to know about how they're doing as a congregation. It could be about how and the health of the church there. And so yeah, it could be to hold them accountable. Is that I want to know I want to get updates on, are you progressing in this way? And Timothy, since they aren't really able to text about it, he trusts that Timothy will give an accurate report about what he wants um, and expects out of them.
Well, it's
Since
kind of like
yeah,
in the book of Philemon, when he's trying to get Philemon to let Onesimus go.
Yeah.
Onesimus was his slave. And he's telling him all this stuff, and sounds like a real good case he's making. But then he says, and one more thing, prepare a guest room for me because I hope to be restored to you and answer to your prayers. I'm coming to see you. To see if you get it, what I ask you to do.
yeah, there's an element, and yeah, Paul sends Timothy because he himself can't come, but he says, I trust Timothy like I would trust like a child, right? He's like he knows me and my ministry better than anyone. Um, maybe not about better than anyone, but so listen to this. So I said it up here in the slides. There are several parallels between the language of 2:6-11 about Jesus and 2:19-30 about Timothy and Epaphroditus. And I'll give a couple, and I don't want us to necessarily take the time right now, but look at verse 21. All of them are seeking their own interests, not those of Jesus Christ, which I guess that's a little bit earlier. That's mentioned, not verses 6, but rather he says he doesn't want people in verse 4 to look to their own interests, but to the interests of others. He's saying Timothy is like Jesus in that he cares about others' interests. So Timothy's a great servant in this respect. And uh, that are there any other comments that people would like to make on Timothy, maybe as an example, before we go on? It isn't necessarily, we don't have to do it. Okay, let's go on to Epaphroditus. Um, I'll read this section. Still, I think it necessary to send you Epaphroditus, my brother and co-worker and fellow soldier, your messenger and minister to my need. For he has been longing for all of you and has been distressed because you heard that he was ill. He was indeed so ill that he nearly died, but God had mercy on him, and not only on him, but on me also, so that I would not have one sorrow after another. I am the more eager to send him, therefore, in order that you may rejoice at seeing him again, and that I may be less anxious. Welcome him, then, in the Lord with all joy, and honor such people, because he came close to death for the work of Christ, risking his life to make up for those services that you could not give me. There's a lot packed in here in terms of the situation, the historical situation behind this letter. So Epaphroditus, we don't have any other information about him besides these verses right here. But as I said sort of several weeks ago in the introduction to Philippians, Epaphroditus was sent by this congregation in Philippi, or the congregations in Philippi, as a messenger of a gift of aid to Paul while he was in prison. And so, as Epaphroditus went and gave them updates on the church there and gave them the gift from the Philippians, um, Epaphroditus got sick while he was there, and it's been a while since he's been delayed for some time, and they were probably worried about him. We don't know if maybe the Philippians sent other messengers or sent a word like, "Where's Epaphroditus? Where did he go? Did he get like?" At this point, they're wondering, did he run off with the gift? Like, there's a lot of questions you might have about what happened to Epaphroditus. But it's more. But what happens here is that Epaphroditus is likely being sent back with this letter. And this part is explaining why he was so delayed in his return. And it sort of shows what else does it show about Epaphroditus and even the Philippian church as well? He was willing to risk his life. And it what's cool about this, again, that's parallels language. It talks about he was ill and nearly died. He was he nearly died in what's that, verse 27, right? Uh yes, he says that he was near to death, and that Jesus himself, he died death and to the point, or he became obedient to the point of death on the cross. And Epaphroditus is one who's willing to go to that length as well, to obey and to be a part of the service of the gospel in this way. Yes. Yeah, he came close to death. Yeah, I think that's, let's see, verse 30. Yeah, he drew near to death. Yeah, let me see if I think that's the same phrase even used. Yeah, it's the same phrase used in verse 8 about Christ. Uh, he became obedient, mechritanatu, to the point of death. And it's the same phrase used of Epaphroditus. He came near mechritanatu, until death, right there. So that using exact language, talking about Christ, to talk about Epaphroditus there, commending him. Um, so yeah, that's. Uh, so I think Paul is giving the Philippians again further examples of what it means to live like Christ, and he gives examples of himself being poured out. He gives it Timothy as one who is genuinely seeking the concern of others, and Epaphroditus as someone who's willing to be obedient to the point of death, uh, to help further the cause of the gospel and for the sake of others and ministry to others. And so I think, so if you can keep those three examples in mind, in addition to Jesus as the ultimate pattern, we're in a good place. Are there any other comments before we close for today? Okay. Well, who has the prayer list? You want to say it? Okay.
So everybody get a chance to